So if we are not connected with our knowing, if we cannot trust our knowing, then we are living by other people's standards. And we know whether we did something good or bad based off whether or not they are happy with us or not happy with us. And that, of course, is outside of us, not inside of us. So our internal knowing is inside of us. It means despite what other people think, that doesn't change our internal truth. So you don't need everyone to understand or agree with your limits for them to be valid. And you can handle the discomfort that comes with setting boundaries because you know you're protecting your emotional safety. Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it. And let's do it together. Welcome back to Grow with Robin Breckenridge. Today, we are talking about self-trust. And not just kind of like the surface, we're just going to talk about believing in yourselves, but in the deep foundational way that really impacts everything, your decisions, your relationships, your emotional safety, and the way that you move and interact in the world. But before we get into how to build self-trust, we have to talk about why so many of us struggle with it in the first place. And here's the thing, it's not your fault. Most of us learn not to trust ourselves because we had to disconnect from our inner knowing in order to survive. That's really what trauma does. It means that we had to disconnect from ourselves in order to survive in the environment that we grew up in. So let me give you an example. If you can imagine a child growing up in a home where they see something that doesn't sit right, like even as kids, energy doesn't lie. It never lies. We have an internal knowing even as children. So maybe like a parent's behavior feels off. Maybe there's dishonesty or there's something unspoken that's going on and creating tension in the home. And one day the child decides to ask, why is dad acting like that? And instead of there being that question being met with honesty, they're met with gaslighting. And you don't have to have bad parents for this to happen. I mean, for most of us, we really do want to shield our children from the realities of being an adult and what's going on in the home. So maybe the parent says like, what are you talking about? Everything's fine. Or maybe you grew up in a home where someone's going to say, oh my gosh, stop making things up. And just like that, in those moments, that child's inner knowing gets overridden. They saw something, they felt something, but the adult that they rely on just told them that their perception was wrong. And in that moment, it creates a split where the child, of course, unconsciously, but the way to figure that out is like, I can't trust what I see and feel. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should ignore my instincts. And the more this happens, the further they disconnect from themselves. And this doesn't even have to be in our home. Maybe it's something that happened in a relationship with someone else growing up, in school. But we learn to doubt our gut feelings, to override our discomfort, or to seek external validation instead of trusting our own perception. And the truth is, we carry that into adulthood. So if you struggle with self-trust, if you second guess yourself, if you find it hard to know what's right or aligned for you, it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because at some point you had to disconnect from yourself to survive. But today, we're changing that. We are actively leaning into our knowing. We are building new data on how to show up for ourselves. And we are reteaching our nervous system that we can trust our own voice and inner knowing. And this shift starts with small micro moments. So before I dive into this even further, I'm going to tell you guys a quick story about where my journey started with self-trust. I had gone to a workshop facility at a low point in my life, and we had done some inner child work. And up until that point, I had done, at least heard about the concept of having an inner child and read about it, but it really hadn't landed. And at this particular retreat, it started to land. And they did a beautiful guided meditation during this retreat where we, went to our safe place, turned around the corner and found our inner child all adorable and innocent. And we were to tell them, obviously in our head, I'm here for you. I'm going to protect you. I have your back now. And extend our hand out. And the inner child is going to take our hand and we are going to walk off into the sunset. So I did all of that. And my cute, adorable, innocent inner child turned around and looked at me. I said, I got you. I'm going to take care of you now. I'm going to keep you safe. Come on, let's go. And she looked at me and said, oh my God, not you. Anyone but you. And I remember thinking, of course, like, oh gosh, maybe I'm doing this meditation wrong. Or is anyone else laying here on their yoga mat with their inner child being horrifically disappointed that they're the one coming for them? And then I realized in that moment that what I was asking my inner child was way too tall of an order. I define trust as data over time. And my inner child did not have very good data on me. She had a lot of data that I didn't really show up for her, that I took her to situations and people that were very similar to the things that hurt her in the past, that I neglected her, and that I often needed to kind of dissociate or compartmentalize her to live my life. And so that was a pretty fair statement that she made. Oh God, not her. And so I decided not to ask her to trust me because that seemed a little bit like an unfair ask, but I asked her to lean in. And I said, hey, listen, I might mess up again. And I know that I have royally messed up in protecting us and keeping us safe. But from here on out, I'm going to keep trying. And every time I mess up or fail us or disappoint us, I'm going to learn from it and try again. And that little girl in the meditation, she turned towards me and she put her hand in my hand and we walked off. And that's really where I started rebuilding trust with myself. Now, I haven't done a meditation like that in a long time, but I know now if I did that exact same meditation, that little girl would turn around and put her hand in my hand because I completely shifted the way I showed up for her and for myself through my actions. So that's where we're going to start today. Maybe right now the concept of self-trust seems a little bit unrealistic. So let's back it up here. Let's go to the basics and let's start talking about how to rebuild self-trust. So self-trust is built when you keep the promises you make to yourself, even the small ones. Now, of course, we always want to have realistic expectations. So it is not realistic for us to set a goal that we are 100% consistent, or even that we expect other people to be 100% consistent, because humans really aren't 100% consistent. We are actively in the school of life. We are learning, which means that we are going to test life out. We are going to make mistakes. We are going to learn from them. So the unrealistic expectation would be that we keep every single promise that we make to ourselves. The realistic expectation would be that we mostly keep the promises we make to ourselves. So that would be consistency, not perfection. listening to your gut instinct instead of overriding it, following through on things that are aligned even when they're hard, and treating yourself like someone who is worthy of trust, value, and respect. Now, self-doubt, which would be the opposite of self-trust, grows when you constantly seek external validation over your own knowing, where you constantly override what you know in favor of what is expected of you. If you speak to yourself in ways that reinforce insecurity and self-distrust, and if you abandon your boundaries so that you can avoid conflict, and if you've ever been stuck in self-doubt mode, the way out isn't to force yourself to be more confident. It's really about starting to collect new data on what it means to trust yourself. So in the very near future, I am going to start talking about setting boundaries in your life. I don't even know how many episodes we're going to do on that because one, it's a fan favorite. Two, I think we all need it and can all benefit from learning a new system of boundaries or refreshing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about self-trust when it comes to boundary setting. And then I promise you, in the next few episodes, we're going to start diving into boundaries in a very, very deep and complex way. So self-trust is what allows you to set and hold boundaries. Because if you don't trust yourself, you will constantly second guess your limits and feel guilty for enforcing them. Now, we're going to talk a lot about guilt in future episodes, but guilt really means I did something bad. Bad meaning out of my integrity. So whenever I have someone working through a guilt wound and learning how to take their power back from it, I ask them to ask themselves a vetting question. And the question is, did I do something bad by my standards? Now, I know I'm talking right now, but if I could put that last part in all caps, I would. By my standards. Now, standards is a part of your truth. It's a part of your knowing. So if we are not connected to that, we are not connected with our own standards, which means we are probably living by the standards of others, which can get pretty messy when we start setting boundaries in our life, because maybe we go, okay, boundaries to me are a way to keep myself emotionally safe and protect myself. And that is not bad by my standards, but that might be bad by someone else's standards. So if we are not connected with our knowing, if we cannot trust our knowing, then we are living by other people's standards. And we know whether we did something good or bad based off whether or not they are happy with us or not happy with us. And that, of course, is outside of us, not inside of us. So our internal knowing is inside of us. It means despite what other people think, that doesn't change our internal truth. So you don't need everyone to understand or agree with your limits for them to be valid. And you can handle the discomfort that comes with setting boundaries because you know you're protecting your emotional safety. And we'll get to this when we start talking about boundaries, but I will tell you based off my standards, which do not have to be your standards, that it is never bad to protect your emotional safety, not for you and not for other people. Because emotional safety starts with you and it is your job. So I'll repeat a lot of things in this podcast because repetition is the mother of learning and repeating these things never hurt. But your number one priority and responsibility in this life is to keep yourself emotionally safe. If you can keep yourself emotionally safe as often as you can, life gets better, conflict goes down in your relationships, you are able to live a very aligned life, aligned meaning that it is aligned with your truth. So I cannot talk about self-trust without talking about the way you talk to yourself. Sometimes I give this invitation to clients, but I'm not going to give it to you guys today because I just think it's too much. And sometimes it's a really awful, barf-tastic way to check in on how you're talking to yourself. But sometimes I'll have my clients just like for one day, write down all the things that they catch themselves saying to themselves. Because I had a moment one time, and it was a while ago, where I was paying attention to this very thing, and I walked by a mirror, and I just so happened to be curious as to what I was saying to myself. I think on any other day, I wouldn't have really paid attention to this. And the things that I said to myself were so horrifically mean that it stopped me in my tracks. And I said to myself, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how freaking mean that just was. And I realized in that moment, I would never, ever speak to another human being that way in my life. I would be mortified. And yet here I am unconsciously talking to myself like that all the time. And if I didn't bring consciousness to it, if I wasn't curious about what I was saying, then instead of observing it, it just sounded like truth. And that truth made me feel really awful about myself. And ultimately, my core wound is around not feeling good enough. So having that kind of talk just going on constantly without any interruption was actually growing my not enough wound, the very thing that I was spending countless amount of dollars and so much time and energy trying to heal. It is so important how you speak to yourself. One of the biggest things that either strengthens or weakens your self-trust is how you speak to yourself. So if you can imagine that we're all sitting here in my office and we're trapped in here and we cannot get out. Door is locked, no way out. Windows are locked, and there's a loudspeaker. And on that loudspeaker, it's just incessantly talking about all the things that we're doing wrong. It is criticizing us. You always mess up. You can't trust yourself. You should have known better. You're screwed. It's never going to get better for you. I knew you couldn't do this. Everyone knows how bad you suck. The list goes on and on and on. Would you want to spend time in that room? Doubtful. Would you, after probably a certain amount of time of that just constantly going, would you do anything you could to get out of that room? Probably. Probably you might bust a window out, crawl out of a window, do whatever you can to get out. And that is essentially what happens in our relationship to ourselves. Our body is our biosphere. It's the thing that we live in. And if there is a loudspeaker in that is constantly criticizing us, constantly degrading and putting ourselves down, we are going to do anything we can to get out of that biosphere. Now, obviously, in our body, we don't break a window and bust out of there. But the way that we bust out of those feelings is we get out of our body. Often we will go to our heads and we will overprocess things there, or we will get into our action. Now, the reason why that doesn't work is because, one, our inner child and all of the wounded parts that need us live in our body. Two, our feelings happen in our body. And feelings are not these awful things. They are a communication system. And in fact, when we learn that communication system, which I'm so excited to help impart to all of you guys, when we learn that communication system, it actually helps us navigate life, and it actually helps us create lives that have way more peace and joy and love, because that communication system is always communicating a need through our emotional experiences. So we can't really live in this biosphere and create the life we want if we are disconnected from our bodies. So I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for us to create a biosphere within us that is safe, encouraging, loving, and kind. So that leads me to a topic that I love to talk about, which is the difference between loneliness and solitude. So many of us, when we are by ourselves, which is really why a lot of times we have Sunday scaries, or My phone blows up from clients on a Sunday because a lot of the time Sundays we're alone with ourselves. There might not be a whole lot to do, and we're looking at facing another week of stress and challenges or monotony or whatever it is. And so, a lot of us want to escape that reality. Maybe drinking is an escape, gummies, relationships, losing ourselves in other people, workaholism, shopping, the list goes on and on and on, right? So if you struggle to feel alone, you might want to ask yourself this: do I feel restless and uneasy when I'm alone, or do I feel grounded and peaceful? Because loneliness is being disconnected. It's being disconnected from others. We're hardwired for connection. But ultimately, the calling of loneliness is that we are disconnected from ourselves. Loneliness is calling us back to connection with ourselves. But solitude is similar. In loneliness, we might not have a whole lot of connection. In solitude, we might healthily disconnect from people, our environment, but we are still connected with ourself. So self-trust is what turns loneliness into solitude. So how do we do that? Here's where we start. Go back to the last episode where I talked about self-care practices. That is a really great place to start. Solitude means I enjoy being with myself because I'm in connection with myself. So just like if you were to call a friend up on a lonely Sunday and be like, hey, do you want to go for a hike? You want to go to a yoga class? Let's catch up. Let's go to a movie. These are all things that we're doing to stay connected with someone else. We can do those things with ourselves. I know that it's not as glamorous as advertised as being, in connection with other people. But this is where, I tell people, if I had $1 for every time this happened, I would, probably have a summer home somewhere. But what ends up happening is a lot of people will come into this work with me struggling with loneliness, and they will be longing for a relationship or coming out of some unhealthy relationship patterns. And there's a period of time where it's really hard to be in solitude with themselves and enjoy being with themselves. And then we'll go through this work and they will have great data over time and learn how to show up for themselves through self-connection, self-care, and self-trust. And then a really aligned relationship will come in, and there'll be kind of a new challenge of wait, I love all this time that I'm spending with myself. I'm having so much fun with myself. Do I really want to give this up and, have it be compromised to be in relationship with someone else? Now, of course, we can still be connected with ourselves and in connection with someone else in relationship. But it just shows how quick the pendulum can swing from I don't want to be with myself to I love being with myself so much. I'm not sure I want to give time to something else. So shifting from loneliness into solitude is really about showing up for yourself, going on that hike in connection with yourself. Maybe that's talking to yourself, connecting with yourself. So how do you shift loneliness into solitude? And I'm sure we'll talk about this in future episodes too, but go back to that self-care structure that I taught you in the last episode. Show up for yourself in foundational ways. And that right there is shifting from loneliness to solitude. So how do we rebuild trust in practical steps? If you've been struggling with self-trust, you can start rebuilding it today, one small action at a time. So 1, keeping small promises to yourself, following through on even the smallest of commitments. If you say you're going to take a walk, take the walk. Now, of course, I do not want anybody to shift into rigidity here. We all need grace. And I talked about that in the last episode. There are some days where we're just going to nail self-care and self-connection. There are other days that maybe we just don't have the bandwidth. But showing up for ourselves, even in the smallest of ways, is continuing to shift that data over time, that you are a priority and that you matter. So your brain will start to register, oh yeah, right. That girl or that guy or that person, they do what they say they're going to do. Their words and actions align. You really can't have trust without consistency, without words and actions aligning. And that applies to self-trust. So I mentioned in the last episode that for an intellectual self-care, I do like to read. I'm an avid learner, but there are some times where like I just don't have it in me, or at the end of the night, my bandwidth is compromised, whatever, and I can't read a chapter of a book or even a page of a book. So I will open up that book and read one word or one sentence, not because that's like profound in my intellectual journey, but because I am keeping a promise to myself. And I know that in that moment, it's not that big of a deal. But when the shit hits the fan in my life, when I'm dysregulated and it's hard to find the highest, healthiest version of myself, those are the times when knowing that there's a part of me that will show up is crucial. So again, we can give some leeway here. We can give some grace, but keeping your promises to yourself and your words and actions aligning to yourself as best as you can is a great first place to start building self-trust. Number 2, learning discernment versus judgment. So we're going to talk about curiosity over and over and over again, because I think it's like an amazing relational tool is to get curious versus judgmental. But curiosity and discernment are kind of two sides of the same coin. We need to get curious so that we can get more data and information on people, ourselves, our environment. But discernment means good judgment. It means that we are taking that data and we are applying it with good judgment. Like, okay, this happened this many times, or I've noticed that I keep writing my self-care goals out and I am not showing up to them. You can tell yourself, look, you failed. You can't even do this. Everybody else is probably listening to this podcast and doing it. Listen, I used to be a teacher and now I'm a teacher of sorts as a coach. I have never, ever, ever seen shame be a good, positive motivator. Like it might motivate you to get places, but you are going to suffer along the way. So instead of asking, is this right or wrong? We can start shifting this kind of black and white perspective to, is this aligned or not aligned? And how do we know if it's aligned or not aligned? The data that we're collecting. Remember, trust means data over time. So you might be listening to this going, I don't even know what my data is. Okay, no big deal. We're starting now. Number 3, challenge the stories you're telling yourself. Just like the example I gave where I walked by the mirror and literally beat the living shit out of myself for no reason. I don't even know what was happening that day, but nothing important was happening. If you do not challenge or get curious with the stories that you are telling yourself, which a lot of times we are telling ourselves scary stories. Like when bad things happen in our life, guarantee you, if you wrote down what you were telling yourself, it's probably not nice. It's probably not encouraging. It's probably not helpful. And if you envision that you are not just talking to yourself, that you are talking to a smaller version of you, like when you're like, we're fucked, nothing's ever going to get better. Other things happen for people, but not us. You are essentially sitting down a younger part of you and telling that younger part of you that. And if anybody knows kids or has kids in their life, if you had a dysregulated child and then you told them, oh my God, you are screwed. It's never going to get better. And everybody else is doing it but you. Is that child going to calm down or is that child going to panic more? So bringing an awareness of how we are supporting ourselves through challenges is huge. If I called a friend up and said, hey, listen, I'm going through this thing. I am like at my wit's end. I don't even really know what to do here. I'm scared. I'm terrified. And they were like, listen, you're probably not going to be able to handle this. You suck. You're not good at this. Everybody else is way better than you. I'm probably not going to call that person for support anymore because that's not helpful, right? So considering that your inner dialogue shapes your reality. And if you start noticing the way that you're talking to yourself and we have some awareness over it, then we can start to challenge it. Just like I was saying earlier in the story that I was telling myself, that if I did not get curious with the inner dialogue that was going on inside of me, it just would have felt like truth. And it wasn't true. Like, I remember one of the things that I said to myself was, "You look so old." This was probably 10 years ago. I wasn't even old then. I was in my early 30s. Like, that was not a true statement. So start noticing the way that you're talking to yourself. And if this is not something that you would say to a friend, or if you said this to someone else and you were mortified by that, we might want to get curious with just leaning into some self-compassion. And I know I've worked with a lot of people. When we start leaning into self-compassion, we go, "Oh my gosh, my motivators, the drill sergeant, the critical one, these are the ones that have gotten me up and out of bed and successful." Well, I can tell you that I've worked with thousands of people, and that level of motivation and that approach is not helpful if you care about your emotional well-being and how much you're suffering in life. So number 4, taking responsibility for your emotional safety, realizing that there is no one else for the job. And I'm sure there are people on here who have thought that maybe their partner would keep them safe or help them through their self-esteem issues or whatever's going on. And it just doesn't happen. And it doesn't even matter. Like, you can have the most aligned partner in the world and they cannot manage your inner child. They cannot do this for you. They cannot create internal emotional safety for you. It is your job. So you are the person who is responsible for protecting your peace. And where are we starting? We're starting with that biosphere. How peaceful and safe is your body? How peaceful and safe is your biosphere? And number 5, spending time with yourself intentionally, because self-trust is what turns loneliness into solitude. Self-trust isn't something you just wake up with one day. It's something that you build moment by moment, choice by choice, action by action. It's built in the way that you show up for yourself. And life is a relentless showing up. It's built in the way you speak to yourself and the way you honor your needs, even when no one else is watching. Rebuilding self-trust is not about perfection. It is about consistency. It's about proving to yourself over time through small intentional actions that you are someone you can rely on, that you are someone who's safe, and that you are someone that no matter what has your back. So as you move forward this week, I invite you to do one small thing to strengthen your self-trust. Rebuilding self-trust is not about perfection. It is about consistency. It's about showing yourself over time through small intentional actions that you are someone you can rely on, that you are someone that you can trust, and that you are someone that no matter what happens will have your own back. And here's the truth. Trusting yourself is a risk. It means that stepping into the unknown doesn't have guarantees. It means making decisions without knowing exactly how they will turn out, or being able to control the outcome is tough. But if you can commit to looking for the learning in every experience, then there are no mistakes. There's only opportunities to grow and learn. I believe that this life is a journey of getting to know ourselves more deeply. There's no way that we can know ourselves without challenges. Those are really some of the most fruitful places we get the most data on ourselves. So as you move forward this week, I invite you to do one small thing to strengthen your self-trust. Whether it's keeping one promise to yourself, even if it's small, challenging one story, or challenging the way that you speak to yourself. That's one that keeps you from doubting yourself. And again, creating new data over time. Or take one action that protects your emotional safety. Because remember, that is your responsibility. And when you begin to trust yourself, things shift. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop looking for others to tell you what's right for you. You can stop abandoning yourself for the sake of approval. And instead, you start to create a life that actually feels like yours. And if self-care is our first step in coming home to ourselves, then working on self-trust is like creating the energy that's in our home. Now that we just brought awareness to it, let's make that home a safe one just as best as we can. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.